let's
Ready
get
to
the
record?
party started.
Yep,
Ready?
go ahead and record.
Okay.
Ready to go?
All set?
Thanks. All right, I'll call the meeting to order. This is the January 12th, 2021 meeting of the Town Plan and Zoning Commission for the Town of Fairfield. The first item on our agenda are meeting minutes from December 8th, 2020.
Move to approve.
Oh, actually been, and I'm sorry, I called it. I'll get back to that in a second. I was remiss. Mr. Wendt just reminded me, but we have Commissioner Noonan who's absent, and we have our alternate Commissioner Elliott who will sit in his place this evening, okay? And Commissioner Elliott, you were present at the last meeting, correct? Okay, very good. So, Commissioner Francis moved to approve the minutes, and I had a second from Commissioner Braun, correct? Excellent. Any comments? Edits? Yes, Commissioner Corcoran.
On page 4, where we're discussing the Beach Road reasoning, it mentions that there are special events that could occur in the area of church, funeral, town events, etc., near the bottom of the page. And I was just suggesting that we include some context of where this building is in our explanation by saying that it is in close proximity to schools, a church, funeral home, and a town hall. I don't know if that's necessary, but in the write-up, there doesn't seem to be a setting for exactly where it is.
That was certainly part of the record, and certainly relevant to this this section here. I wouldn't have any objection to that. Commissioner Francis, would you like to include that in your motion?
You're correct. It was mentioned several times. Yes.
Okay. Commissioner Braun? Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, could we go?
Yep.
We're on the talking about special events. Right above there, we're talking about the school, which is across the church and the school across the street. So you're saying that the special events, church, funeral, town events, you want to say which are in close proximity there? Is that what?
Well, my idea was that we do mention the school and the church, but then the special events include the funeral and town events.
Mm-hmm.
So I was thinking that we should point out that it's in close proximity to the town hall and the funeral home, a couple schools, and a couple churches.
All right. Okay.
All right. Any other questions or comments on that? Okay, hearing none, seeing none. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, the minutes, that small edit, are passed unanimously. The next item on our agenda is 1B, Post Road, Uncore Road, Community Theater Plaza, referral for recommendation. 8-24 of the Connecticut General Statutes, municipal improvements regarding the lease of town property. Mr. Wendt?
Okay, Mr. Chairman, Jim Wendt for the record. The town is seeking to amend an existing lease of the town property in the area in front of the community theater to expand the existing leased premises from 560 square feet to 1,730 square feet in order to facilitate the expansion of an existing outdoor dining for the Old Post Tavern and for the establishment of a new restaurant to replace a former retail space. It's important to note that tonight we're only talking about making a recommendation with respect to the lease that has to go before the RTM. The Board of Selectmen approved the lease modification at their meeting on January the 4th. The new restaurant proposal will require a subsequent zoning compliance application to this commission, which will be forthcoming. But this is, the matter on the agenda tonight is just a recommendation to the RTM as to whether or not you're recommending favorably or unfavorably the extension of the lease as outlined in the documents that were submitted. We did provide those lease details in the agenda link. The overall plaza improvements are proposed to create a more vibrant pedestrian commercial focus point at this important crossroads of our downtown. There was a site plan attached in all of that. Mark Barnhart is on the phone, available with any additional questions that you might have beyond what I have just presented. And that is all I have at this point, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Could I have a motion here to get this conversation started? Motion to approve by Commissioner Bremen, yes. And seconded by Commissioner Levy, yes.
Yes.
And I have a couple of questions, but let's, Commissioner Bremen, why don't you get started if you'd like?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair and staff. I reviewed the lease materials, and it's my understanding we're being asked not to comment on the business terms or other matters other than the TPZ's role with respect to planning and zoning with respect to what is being proposed. I felt that from a planning perspective, it was prudent for us to consider improvement of that intersection and also enhancement of outdoor dining due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And I felt that any issues that we might have with respect to specifics of the proposal could be adequately addressed in the zoning compliance application. So I would move to favorably recommend to the RTM.
Okay, very good. Commissioner Levy?
Yeah, I would concur with those comments. Looking at the proposed enhancements, which of course will come before us at a later date, I think expanding the outdoor dining area along with the potential improvements right in the center of town is a very favorable opportunity we have here and would recommend it to the RTM.
Okay. Commissioner Braun, question? You're on mute.
I have a question. I don't know who's here to answer it about the dimensions of the expansion. It doesn't look like it's expanded. We're just talking about outside seating, right? Is it expanding up the hill, up Uncle Road towards like the front of the theater?
Yeah, there are two elements to the expansion here. If you look at the site plan or the plan that's in the lease, the Old Post Tavern has an existing patio space of approximately 500 feet, and they're looking to extend that further outward.
If we're not done, go on. A lot of feedback.
So they're looking to extend the footprint of the existing outdoor dining in front of Old Post Tavern, which was implemented as part of a COVID application earlier in the year. To allow that to expand. They're looking to formalize that for the future. The second piece of this is there's a prospective new restaurant on the other side of the lobby of the theater that's also proposed. It will be the subject of an application, and that is proposing a new outdoor space in front of that tenant space for prospective outside dining. So it's both an expansion of the existing tenant at Old Post Tavern and for a prospective new tenant on the other side of the theater lobby.
Thanks.
I had a question about the high season, in season, and off season. We've been, I think, getting some pressure from restaurants in town to expand the season, right? Putting chairs out, tables out in advance of May 1 and wanting to keep them out after October 31. I mean, November this year was incredibly warm, and with COVID we still have outdoor dining, right? Under regulations. Current outdoor dining annual certifications are for periods beginning is it April 1?
Yes, April 1 through the end of October.
Yeah. So why here are we in season from 5/1 and ending 10/31? It would seem to me that the um, in-season rate would apply anytime anytime the demised premises are being used for outdoor dining, and that the off-season would be those months where it's not. And so that would enable some flexibility, I think, in the certification of the outdoor dining process, right?
Yeah, I will answer that in a couple of ways. Firstly, I think more globally, I think what we have experienced with this pandemic in our relaxation, if you will, of outdoor dining opportunities to allow restaurants to do essentially what they needed to do within reason and within public safety guidelines reviewed by other agencies,
Yeah.
to allow uh, um, an expanded footprint of outdoor dining opportunity has proved incredibly beneficial for those um, restaurants. And I think going forward, we should probably give some consideration and further discussion to post-pandemic when we're back to normal, if you will, to consider whether or not we should, take on some of those things that we have done administratively perhaps more informally, or codify a regulation that allows those things to happen, potentially expanding the season, if you will, under guidelines. It is self-regulating to some degree, but there are other structural and other heating things that people can do to extend the season. I think that's been very well received by the public and by the business community. So I think we need to have a discussion about that going forward, and perhaps reviewing our policies and regulations with respect to outside dining in general. But specific to your question about the months in the lease, I suppose that can be adjusted. I don't know if Mark has any comment with respect to that, but it may have been modeled after the original lease for Old Post Tavern. This was one of the very first under a predecessor restaurant entity. It was one of the very first pioneer outdoor dining establishments in town back when the operations started in May. So maybe that's why that original lease goes back to the May date when the commission did adjust and expanded that time frame to April from May. I did not take note of that in the prospective lease terms, but I'm sure that can be discussed and negotiated with the parties. I don't know if Mark, if Mark's on the call, if he's got anything he wants to add to that.
Mr. Barnhart, are you there?
I can't. Oh, there we go. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes. Mr. Wentz' explanation is spot on. This was essentially the language that was in the original lease between the town and Old Post Tavern that was picked up as part of the assumption of that lease commitment by Cleveland Properties acting under Fairfield Community Theater LLC. I don't think there would be necessarily any issue should the season change and be modified to extend those rates to encompass a broader period. But we essentially kept the language the way it was. The only change that was requested by the applicant or the other party was to increase the leasehold footprint. And so we tried to keep all the rest of the terms the same.
No, that all makes sense. And I get that the earlier lease was under the the prior regime of outdoor dining, and I suppose in the off season, if you will, where outdoor dining has been allowed in the pandemic, we're doing so as a substitute for seats that would otherwise be indoors, right? By the same token, it's the use and exploitation of town land, and if they're using it for a business purpose, then I could see an argument that they should be paying rent for that same way they would pay, rent for their building. for the use. So, one way to do this would be to say that they pay the increased rate, the higher rate for such period that the town certifies them and is for outdoor dining on those premises, and they pay the lower rate during the months when the town has not approved the use of the land for outdoor dining. And then that might fluctuate actually from year to year, and it's subject to, builds in some flexibility for years down the line. It's a 10-year lease. If we expand that and begin to allow folks to certify for outdoor dining in March, for example, or extend it into November or even December, which I could see happening very easily, then the town would be protected from that. Parties here wouldn't have to go back and finagle with it. So I don't know whether we need to build that into the recommendation or not. Obviously an error because it doesn't align with our current, certification dates.
Yeah, I mean, I'll let Mark comment. My personal opinion would be, I don't know that you need to be that specific. I think we're looking here on the general use of whether or not you think it's appropriate for the town to enter into a lease for the use in general. The specific terms of the lease, I don't know that you'd want to condition specifically, but I think this discussion can certainly be passed on to the appropriate parties and made part of the recommendation more informally than as part of the motion. But I'll leave that to the commission's discretion.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it's a referral for recommendation, so we can make a favorable recommendation with comments.
Sure.
And included in those comments are that the dates for outdoor dining are not consistent with our current process, and it may be in the town's interest to simply structure the rents to be in alignment with the annual certification dates of outdoor dining, such that when the demised land is being used as certified for outdoor dining, they're paying the higher rent. When it's not, they're not. They're paying the lower rent. So who made that original motion?
Mr. Brayman, seconded by Mr. Levy.
Thank you. So Commissioner Brayman, would you accept a friendly amendment as I suggested?
Yes, I would amend my motion to be a motion to favorably recommend the proposed lease amendment to the RTM with the statement or the recommendation that the town consider having the dates for which the rent for in season is applied correspond to the dates for which outdoor dining is permitted under town regulation.
Yeah. All right. Commissioner Levy, second. Okay. Thumbs up. Thank you. All right. Second by Levy, accepted. Thank you very much. That was a visual cue. All right. All those in favor say.
Wait, one question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Commissioner Francis.
The benches and the bike rack are still remaining.
Well, there is an overall proposal to reconfigure a bit arrange the furniture, pun intended, with new landscaping as shown, and there are benches, and I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I'm looking for the
It may be that black.
Yes, there will be benches and a bike rack there. Yes.
Thank you, Mark.
Yeah, the gardens are very attractive, and they will have public access between the 3 gardens and the one that's access into the theater.
Yes.
And this is too, to the left, outside Old Post exterior dining, and that's a public sidewalk there.
Correct.
into the theater. Okay. All right. Looks attractive. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Commissioner Braun.
Is any portion of this under the control of the state? Just curious. Like, is there a state right of way because it's a state highway, the post road, or no?
No, most of this property is actually in the Uncle Road right of way. The state right of way is to the south of this, so it's all
Mr. Braun, if we can go
exclusively,
back on mute, I think it's your line.
it's all town property. There's no state property impact.
Thanks. Any other questions or comments? Okay, hearing none, seeing none. Motion is to put in a favorable recommendation with comments. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thanks, Mark.
And that passes unanimously. Thank you very much, Mr. Barnhart. The next items on our agenda is Section 2, new applications to recommend to public hearing. The first is 693 Fairfield Beach Road. It's special exception application of Declan Mihar for a rooftop deck in the Beach District.
I don't really have anything, Mr. Chairman, other than what this says. This and the next item are pretty similar. Our beach district regulations have a provision that if anybody's doing a rooftop deck, that it be subject to a special exception application. We have two such proposals that require public hearing. So this item A and item B will be the subject of a future meeting, but I don't have anything beyond that.
Okay, very good. Any other questions, comments? Motion? Oh, Commissioner Francis, you're on mute. Commissioner Francis, you're on mute.
Sorry. If the motion is granted, is the building still in compliance with our height requirement?
So we don't have an application before us right now. This is a recommendation for public hearing. So we just and I didn't even, forgive me, my procedure was a little off there. I need to take a motion before I ask for questions, comments. This is just simply to move it to public hearing. It'll be scheduled. We'll get a copy of the application in our packet. It'll go to public hearing. Then we'll consider it at a later time. Okay. Okay. Could I have a motion to approve? Motion by Commissioner Levy, second by Commissioner Braun. Thank you both. Any other comments or questions? A public hearing is required on these. Okay, all in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Move to public hearing unanimously. Next is 53 Old Dam Road, special exception application of Michael Schramm for a rooftop deck in the Beach District.
I don't have any other comment other than what I said for the previous item, Mr. Chairman. It needs to go to public hearing.
Very good, and neither do I. Can I have a motion? Motion by Commissioner Braun. Second by Commissioners, all of them. I'll call Mr. Levy. Second by Commissioner Levy. Very good. Thank you, everyone. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? Move to public hearing unanimously. Thank you. Next is old business, zoning regulation amendment, application of the Affordable Housing Committee to amend Section 6 of the zoning regulations, accessory apartments.
Move to approve?
Motion to approve by Commissioner Francis. Mr. Wendt and a second by Commissioner Brayman. Mr. Wendt, did you have any comments that you?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jim Wendt for the record. You heard this back in, this has been a little while, it was at the end of October when this was heard. So again, this regulation amendment is submitted by the Affordable Housing Committee with the support of Fairfield Senior Advocates. And the overarching purpose for this amendment is to create some more flexibility in our regulations and to remove some of the barriers to entry for a proposed accessory unit or ADUs, as this proposal refers to. Our plan of conservation development workshops, during those workshops, we did hear fairly broad support for the consideration of this type of proposal. I'll walk through the specifics of the regulation amendment and then some of the things that we heard at the hearing. So firstly, section 6.3.2, our current regulations require that there's a minimum unit size of 450 square feet for an accessory unit, but the unit cannot exceed 40% of the current floor area of the existing dwelling. The proposal is looking to, seeks to eliminate the 450 square foot minimum square footage and maintain the overall size cap at 40%, but also is introducing a hard cap at 1,000 square feet. So proposing to remove the minimum square footage of a unit, keep the 40% cap, and introduce a hard cap of 1,000 square feet. The next section of the reg, 6.3.3, our current regulation requires that for a home to be eligible for an accessory apartment, it has to both be at least 5 years old and not have undergone an addition for the last 5 years. The current proposal is looking to allow, would maintain the minimum 5-year age proposal, but would allow a house to undergo an addition to implement an apartment. And this, from our, anecdotally from our discussion with potential applicants, is probably the single greatest barrier to entry is our current limitation that someone can't do an addition to their home in order to accommodate an apartment, and this proposal seeks to eliminate that provision. 6.3.4, again, similarly, our current regulation limits the alteration of an existing house to ingress and egress, and the regulation also prohibits a separate access on the front facade. This current proposal would eliminate the prohibition for alteration kind of in conjunction with the previous section if we're going to allow an addition. And it would also allow a separate access on the front facade if there's at least a 10-foot offset between the doors, with the intention that a newly created entry would have a different appearance than the primary entrance, so it wouldn't look like a side-by-side door, to try to eliminate the look of a duplex or a multifamily house. Section 6.3.6 proposes to add language consistent with our existing requirements for roomers and boarders that a lease term be no less than a period of 30 days to prohibit, transient rentals or an Airbnb type of rental for short stays. Proposed section 6.3.10 is a proposal that would add some defining characteristics for a unit to qualify as an affordable housing unit under state statute. And 6.3.11 is a proposal that would permit a detached structure, whether it's an existing structure or a newly built structure, to be eligible for an accessory apartment in the 2-acre AAA zone. If there's at least 2 acres, in that the structure meets all setback height criteria of our other elements of our regulation. And again, it's consistent with the earlier proposal, not exceeding 1,000 square feet and in compliance with the Health and Building Code requirements. So those in essence are the changes that are being proposed. During the hearing, we heard general support, again, for eliminating the barriers to entry. There was some discussion and support for the idea that the proposed 1,000 square foot size cap might be too limiting. And the commission was urged to consider either eliminating that criteria or consider increasing that cap to 1,200 to 1,500 feet. There was also fairly broad support that additions should be permitted to existing homes to be able to accommodate an apartment. But there was also some folks that advocated that the existing requirement that a house be in existence for at least 5 years is perhaps overburdensome, and the commission should consider eliminating that requirement. There was some discussion about the requirement about the front entry and whether the language that was proposed gave clear enough guidance. It was proposed to say of different appearance than the primary entrance. I think the idea, and we talked about this a bit, the idea is for there to be some separation and it not look like that there be, that the appearance maintain a single family look. So I'll leave it to the commission's discretion on that section. I do have a specific recommendation with respect to the language regarding affordable housing. There was some discussion during the hearing about whether that language was correct, and I made a recommendation that that if that's going to be adopted, that we rework that first opening line, and I've got it in my staff report here that it should be reworked to say an accessory apartment may qualify as affordable housing, add may qualify as the language I think we discussed during the hearing, in accordance with the provisions of section 6.3.6 of the regulations as they stand, and then further add the language subject to the design criteria of section 8-30G subsection K, just to be consistent with statutory language. So, and again, this proposal, as our existing regulations, does not require that accessory apartments be deed restricted as affordable units. There may be some discussion going forward with the town to implement a program that would incentivize folks that might want to deed restrict their unit in some sort of a potential tax abatement program. If that does go forward, that would be a program outside of the scope of these regulations. Again, with respect to detached units, there was a fair amount of discussion with general support to allow detached units. But again, similar to the overall size of an attached unit, there was some support for the idea of potentially suggesting that 1,000 square footage cap might be too small, and to consider either just allowing the overall 40% size limit, or considering a 1,200 to 1,500 square foot limit rather than limiting it to 1,000 square feet. Similarly, there was some discussion of whether or not we should consider detached units in a broader scale outside in other districts other than the AAA zone. In my opinion, I think if we were to expand beyond the proposal of the AAA zone, would require us to go back to a new public hearing. So if there's support for consideration of doing that, we can make that recommendation and consider going forward with that in the future. But I think for the purpose of this regulation, at least in my opinion, I think it makes some sense to, give it a try in the 2 acre zone and see how that rolls out. And if it's, and if there's support to broaden that to smaller zones, or the 1 acre or less, we could consider that at a future hearing. But overall, again, the standards for consideration for regulation amendments should be familiar to you. One, is the proposed consistent with the plan of conservation development? 2, does time, experience, and responsible planning for contemporary or future conditions reasonably indicate the need for the proposed amendment? And 3, has it been demonstrated that the proposal is warranted and would serve the general health, welfare, and safety of the town? That was a fair amount of information, kind of recapping what was discussed. I'm happy to answer any questions or dig deeper into any of those particular sections, should there be any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks very much. Commissioner Francis, your motion, before we get started, I think you ought to consider a friendly amendment, as Mr. Wentz suggested, to revise the affordable housing language as staff has recommended.
Susan. Come on, you had 2. Tell the doctor you have 2, that's all.
Mr. Paterla, I recognize your voice, sir. You're on mute. Thank you. Commissioner Francis, you're on mute.
Yes, I would be amenable to that.
Okay, great. Thank you. Commissioner Levy, I think you were the seconder here? Yes? Thumbs up? All right, very good. Excellent. Commissioner Brayman, I'll get to you in a second. Okay? I think Commissioner Levy, you were the seconder on that one, yes?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. All right, so there's obviously there's a lot of subject matter that we could cover. So let's Commissioner Francis, the mic is yours.
All right, I think this is excellent proposal, will allow seniors to stay in town and to rent their houses to other seniors, possibly be a part of their houses, and allow young people to get started in those homes on occasion. In 632, I would strike the word originally. I don't think it serves too much purpose. Well, let me say, I'm in favor of expanding your home if you have to. I don't think we need to go with the original footprint. Don't build on it for 5 years. I don't see much reason for that. However, I would keep the 450 square feet. I mean, I think if you're going to have a living room, a bedroom, a bathroom, and a kitchen, that 450 is consistent with our regulations, which I think demand 600. In 633, I would strike probably all of that because I just don't think it's necessary. Maybe other people do, but I don't think I would be bothered by someone adding on to their house to accommodate a graduate, young adult, or their parent. And then at 634, I would keep the entrance. That's fluffy. I like the way it was worded, and I understand they're trying to be soft about it, but there's really nothing to prevent someone from having 2 front doors 10 feet apart. And I don't think that's too attractive in the character of the neighborhood. So I would prefer to keep the old language. 636, I would agree with that addition because it blends with 31.2.9. Oh, and the 6310, I would totally agree with. So those are really the only things that I would change. Either modify some or keep others.
You recognize that your motion is to approve with
Yes.
the one change. Okay, very good.
And
Commissioner,
I was recommending some additional modifications.
for discussion.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Commissioner Levy?
Yeah, I would move to approve. I also have specific either recommendations or proposed amendments, and I'll leave it to the chair as to how best to present those or address them.
The mic is yours presently, if you'd like to run or respond to Commissioner Francis.
Sure. I would suggest the following amendment, that with respect to 6.32, we do eliminate the 450 square foot minimum. In this era of tiny houses, there's some very adequate, additions or living spaces that people are able to live very nicely in at less than 450. Similarly, I would increase in 6.32. Well, I'd maintain the 40% ratio between the existing and the new, but I would put the cap at 1,500 square feet. That would roughly be 40% of which would be permitted with a 3,750 square foot. So you would maintain an appropriate ratio and scale, which I think would still be fine on a 2-acre lot. So with respect to 6.32, I would eliminate the 450 minimum, maintain the 40% ratio, and cap it at 1,500 square feet. As to 6.33, I would eliminate that entirely, so that there would be no 5-year requirement. Effectively, that would mean that if somebody wanted to build a new house with an existing, wanted to build new with an accessory unit or a detached accessory unit, that would be permitted. I see no reason that the houses have to age before we do this in order to permit somebody, for instance, who might want to build and effectively have a apartment for a senior member of their family. And then as to 6.34, I agree that there should be the 10-foot separation. I do not think we need the requirement that it be separate in appearance. I don't want this to become an architectural review board and get bogged down in that. And there may be, in certain circumstances, maintaining a common look would be just fine. So I would eliminate the requirement that the second door be of a different appearance. And then as to 6.3.11, which is new, I would approve adding that, which allows for the detached accessory unit, and also would amend that to allow for the 1,500 square foot cap. I think those are my three primary areas.
Okay. Thank you very much. Other members of the commission? Commissioner Raymond, you had your hand up earlier. You're on mute, sorry.
I largely concur with the amendments proposed by Commissioner Levy, the modifications to the proposal that Commissioner Levy referenced. Just going point by point, I believe, first of all, in general, this proposal is, one whose time has come. I think this is very much consistent with our POCD and increasing the diversity of housing stock. And really organically created affordable housing. But in particular, I think that there probably is not a need in 6.3.2 for the minimum of 450 square feet. I would agree with the 1,500 square foot or 40% a cap on the side. On the size. I agree with the removal of 6.3.3 in its entirety, so as to allow for the construction of new accessory dwelling units without a building having to age by 5 years. I believe that in 6.3.4, the 10-foot separation between doors is a good one, but that there's no need for a different appearance. And I, of course, agree with the amendment to make our amendments consistent with the general statutes with regard to. And I believe that accessory dwelling units should be allowed detached in the AAA zone as proposed, except with a 1,500 square foot cap instead of 1,000 square feet, as Commissioner Levy mentioned. There is, I think, a typo in 6.3.11. It says in residential AAA, comma, and freestanding accessory structure may be constructed. That needs to be a freestanding accessory structure. Yeah. If there's anything that I missed, I'm happy to have further discussion. But
that's a good type, good catch in the proposal. It should also be spelled out: residence AAA, and the A, comma, A should be lowercase. It's a sentence. Right. And then what about the if you're advocating to increase the square footage to 1,500 square feet? Now, I recognize it's the AAA zone, 2 acres. Should there be a proportionality requirement like there is in the other section, where no greater than 40% or 1,500 square feet?
If you're asking me, I think it was submitted to us that the zoning that the setback regulations and other applicable regulations for the zone would somehow would to a certain extent control the size of the detached accessory unit. I would not be opposed to a percentage cap to make to make it consistent with the the interior attached accessory to the dwelling unit. But you know, I suppose that the cap could be 40% or 1,500 square feet to make them exactly equivalent.
Very good. Commissioner Braun? You need to.
I agree with pretty much what everybody said with the following exceptions. On 6.3.4, the door, I do think it should be 10 feet apart and have a different appearance as it always has to prevent it from looking like a duplex. I think we should be able to review that and approve that. 6.3.6, I don't, maybe other people are aware of it. I'm not aware of rentals for 30 days that other than Airbnb. I think this is going to turn into a business. I think it should be 60 to 90 days minimum. And 6.3.10 affordable housing. I don't know how to do this, but I would really like to incentivize I did get all the material, Jim. Thank you very much about the existing accessory units scattered around town. There's around 250 some odd units. But people have just anecdotally told me there's a whole lot more illegal ones, and I would love to find a way to incentivize them to be approved automatically if they meet, you know, these requirements, I guess. But if they do the deed restriction, that could help us with our 8-30G issue, and it could incentivize them to bring them up to the right code or whatever they need to do to satisfy the other requirements. I don't know how that can be done, because it doesn't seem like we really enforce it anyway. But I'd like to see something in here where if you have an existing illegal or unapproved one, it would be approved if it satisfies these architectural requirements, provided you put the deed restriction on it. I like the proportionality of the separate houses on the separate units on the 2-acre lot, the AAA, the 6.3.11. I like, I think that's fine up to 1,500 square feet. And one last point about logistics. I think we're going to be entering into some planning meetings. It might make sense if we could perhaps incorporate some of these changes into another draft, review that in detail in light of the POCD planning review we're going to be undertaking in the coming weeks and months.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, I two comments. Firstly,
Commissioner Braun, can you mute? Thank you.
With respect to the incentive to try to get existing units that may not be under our permit procedure to create additional affordable units, I agree with that, but I would say that if the town is going to move forward with an incentive program to deed restrict units in general, I think it would be built into that program that there would be an incentive to kind of draw out existing units that would be separate from this regulation. So I agree with you in the intent, but I don't know that it needs to be made part of this regulation. I think that could be crafted as part of whatever incentive program is developed. But I also would agree, and I was going to recommend when we were done with this, that once we hear from everybody's comment, that we can kind of redo the draft based on what appears to be consensus agreement issues, and then leave some of the things that are still subject to debate, for future debate. So I think it's helpful to go through what folks.
Hold on one second. If you're not speaking, please go on mute. Thank you. Please continue, Mr. Wendt.
So I think it does make sense that after the discussion that when we hear if people agree or disagree with certain provisions as we've done so far, that we can kind of create a kind of a consensus draft for your consideration and vote rather than voting en masse this evening. But it's helpful to kind of hear where everybody stands on the particular issues, so we can provide you that consensus revised draft.
Yeah. And I think that makes sense. And in order for us to do that, Commissioner Francis and Commissioner Levy would have to agree to withdraw their motion, and then we'd have a new motion to table the item, the request to staff, to share that red line and circulate that red line to us, and then we would take the application up again at our next meeting on the 26th,
Mhm.
right? So, all right, then with that, and before
Can
we
we-
get there, let
Can we
other.
discuss it a little bit more first?
Yeah, that's what I'm trying. I was just about to say is I'm not meaning to cut off discussion on these on the matter of these points. So, Commissioner Braun, were you finished with your points?
Yeah, I was finished with my points. I do think we need to get something for 8-30G out of this. That's critically important to me. And also, maybe Jim can answer this. If we add a lot more accessory units, does that add to our denominator in the 8-30G calculation or no?
Well, that's an
Maybe
interesting.
maybe Mark can answer that.
I can tell you that under the present, it's very mixed how the state deals with accessory units. Because under the definition in 8-30G, they talk about an accessory apartment being deed restricted for 10 years, and the criteria and some other criteria about a wall between a door between the adjacent, the two units and so forth. But yet, in order to count towards credit to the moratorium points, a unit would have to be deed restricted for 40 years. So there's a disconnect between how it's defined in 8-30G and how the moratorium credit points are calculated. And we have talked to our local delegation, state legislators, to try to tweak that to make the moratorium points consistent with the definition that it be a 10-year deed restriction for affordable units. But I also have heard, because as I understand it, under the present calculations, the affordable units do qualify as a dwelling unit in the denominator, but there is some discussion again at the state level to consider taking those units out of the denominator. So is my understanding, a snapshot view today, they do count, but there is some discussion about potentially taking those out of the denominator.
Yeah.
So again, I agree with you, and the town, I think in general, would like to add units to our 8-30G credit, but I think it's going to take some other steps to do that, like I said before, that would fall outside the scope. I think if we're eliminating some of the barriers is step one. How to get them credited is going to be, again, in my opinion, outside the scope of this particular regulation, but we do agree with you that that is what we are trying to accomplish.
So to that end, why wouldn't we follow the statute and to demand a 10-year 40-year deed restriction for these units and not 10?
Well, it's a good question, because I think it's less. I think if there's going to be an incentive program, we're going to roll something out. I think we're much more inclined to get buy-in at a 10-year period than we would at 40. And I don't think it makes any sense for the statute to define an accessory apartment to be deed restricted for 10 years, but yet you don't get credit for it unless it's deed restricted for 40 years. So there's a disconnect there that we're trying to fix. But if the fix is making it for a longer deed restriction period, we can do that to be consistent with the statute. I just think the end result would be fewer deed restricted units if the criteria for them to qualify is more strict. So we could, but I think we'd end up creating fewer deed restricted units as a result.
Yeah. And is it not possible to condition the availability of an accessory dwelling unit under this structure on the condition that it be an affordable unit and deed restricted in accordance with the statute, such that all new ADUs that are constructed under the amended regulation would be affordable units subject to deed restriction?
Yes, the short answer is yes. Is it possible to have a regulation that requires that? It is. But again, I think that might be counterproductive to the creation of units in general. If folks aren't inclined to deed restrict it as an affordable unit, they are not going to be inclined to come in to establish that unit. So I think we're trying to do both, create more flexible supply of housing for particular family needs and extended families, while at the same time, trying to get units that count. So yeah, we can mandate it, but I don't know if that again becomes counterproductive at some point to the creation of units.
So yeah, so I ask, fellow commissioners, if the universe of tenants that we are seeking to serve are, our elderly extended family members, or our kids coming home from college, and those who are downsizing and so forth, those would ultimately be affordable units. Those folks, it's all measured by income, annual income, not by assets. I mean, those extended family members would have a tremendous amount of assets, but the 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 note, to your point, Commissioner Braun, the notion that we would just be providing a means to the creation of ADUs for the sake of creating ADUs, all under the auspices of creating places for our seniors and elderly to why wouldn't these be deed restricted affordable units such that we could gain the benefit of that under Section 830G? Commissioner Levy.
I guess it depends how much dividend income they have, and that would be a concern. I think we should incentivize making them 830G, and we all agree that we need to increase those available units, but I'd be reluctant to limit all new units to being affordable, because there's always going to be exceptions among certain seniors and others who we are trying to provide for as well. So I'd certainly go for an incentive, but not necessarily a strict requirement there.
Isn't the purpose of the ADU to provide an affordable means for those loved ones to reside? And if their income is such that they can afford to live elsewhere, they can?
Well, they may want to have an extended family, like living with, I'd love to be closer to my grandkids. So that's always not something I'm exploring. So it's not necessarily economically driven.
Yeah.
It may be family style and family units.
And I'm making these comments for discussion purposes, right? I hope that folks don't read into any agenda I might have in discussing these things. But this is the first time that we're, as a group, really kind of digging into this regulation. And quite frankly, all of the little nuances that we're talking about, I think, are it's icing on the cake. Whether it's 450 square feet or 500 square feet, fine. I think the biggest issue is the 5-year, whether it needs to be an existing dwelling for 5 or more years, such that new construction can now take into account and build in the ADU, whether it's within the the original structure or as a truly separate accessory. That's probably the most significant to me. But again, okay, great. The real issue here is that its intent is to be an affordable place for our seniors and extended family members who need a place to live, ostensibly because they otherwise can't afford to live and to take a rental in some other context, or to buy in some other context. And I don't presently have an answer to that question. So I am strongly in favor of us working through some of these revisions and giving thoughts to the issues that we've discussed and tabling this until our next meeting, when we can look at a further revision to the regulation. But I'd ask us all to think about, what I'm talking about, in that, I don't really understand what incentive there is in this regulation for any resident in creating an ADU to deed restrict it and make it an affordable unit under 830G.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, I don't disagree with that last comment, but like I said, as I said before, I think whatever incentive program that is going to come forward, I think, like I said before, is going to be outside the scope of this regulation that would provide that incentive.
Yeah, no, well, that would be, to my mind, that would be an incentive, frankly, to capture those ADUs that are already in existence, whether built under the predecessor regulation and grandfathered, or frankly not built pursuant to the regulation, but as some have mentioned, quote, illegally, in order to capture those. What we're doing today is amending the regulation to provide our residents with far greater rights and opportunities to build these additional dwelling units, which will count, as Mr. Wendt has articulated. They will count in the denominator of our calculus under 830G. And in exchange for the opportunity to do this, I think we ought to be giving a little bit more consideration to the requirement that they be affordable units consistent with 830G, such that the town gains the benefit of that. And if the predicate for us considering these regulations and moving forward with this is in fact the truth, you know, the narrative that we heard, and I firmly do believe it, then I don't understand why there should be issues with the requirement of making the units quote unquote affordable under 830G and deed restricted. And it would provide us, the town, a means to, you know, to build that inventory. Commissioner Braun.
So I may be restating what you just said. My original point was, if we add accessory units and we get credit as affordable housing units, will it also add to the denominator? But now I'm thinking of a worse scenario, which is if we add accessory units and we don't make them affordable, does it add to the denominator, which makes our 8-30G situation much worse? Is that what you just said? That is what you just said. Yeah.
That is exactly what I was just saying. Yes.
If I may, just to expand on what I was going to say before. First of all, I don't think we're talking about a total number of units that's going to move the needle very much in terms of that denominator. We're just shy. We're under 200 units as presently constituted, and I don't think the intent is to have all of these units deed restricted as affordable units. I think organically, as was said before, they become more affordable. In many cases, they're for family situations where there's not even any rent exchanged. And I think the concern about going beyond a 10-year period is going to be that some of these family situations don't extend beyond 10 years. So there would be a lot of pushback, I think, to limiting it to a greater period than that. And if there's going to be an incentive program, you know, in the greater scope of things, you know, having a 40-year deed restriction, I think, is going to be a drastic disincentive to participation, that we are not going to get the number of deed restricted units that you think. So I think, again, we are trying to get support for the concept of matching the statutory definition in 8-30G as a 10-year commitment on an accessory unit to match the moratorium points. That's an administrative state level thing that we have support from our delegation to try to pursue. I just think personally that if you're going to require them to be deed restricted for 40 years, it's going to be a drastic disincentive for participation. In either case, you know, we're talking somewhere in the range of 200 to 250 units broadly compared to 22,000 existing housing units. So in my opinion, I don't think that moves the needle very far on the denominator, if that's the overarching concern here.
No, I understand all of that, and I think that just to being candid, looking back at the letter which is supporting the application, the entire purpose is to create affordable housing. This is on behalf of the Affordable Housing Committee. The purpose of these proposed amendments is to provide greater flexibility. First bullet point, accessory dwelling units make good affordable housing. Next bullet point, accessory dwelling units tend to be better integrated within communities dispersed within single-family neighborhoods rather than clustered aside. The next, accessory apartments allow the elderly to stay in their homes and continue to live independent, productive lives. Most persons to stay in their own homes, in some cases, no longer afford to care for a larger home. It's just all of the rationale for the creation of these units is as affordable units, and under the state statute, we need to think through the lens that we're being asked to think through and to look through through the state statute. And so if our intent here is to create affordable accessory dwelling units, then I think we need to think more carefully about it. Commissioner Corcoran.
I have a couple comments. One is that we've been talking about these units as being affordable housing for seniors, for family members, and so on. But I mean, I just kind of look at this as being a proposal for multifamily houses across all districts. It seems, even if someone wanted to add one of these units, it doesn't necessarily have to be affordable or for the population that we keep mentioning. And as time goes on, as the grandparents are no longer with us, I can see these units just becoming more rentable apartments. I'm not against it, but I'm just saying, I think if we think that these are all going to be grandparents, living in a new apartment, I don't think that's actually what's going to happen. The second comment is that I interact with the Affordable Housing Commission some, and they are interested in creating 830G apartments, but they're really interested in creating affordable housing, and whether it's eligible for 830G or not, I don't think is their primary goal. I'm sure they see 830G as a tool to create affordable housing, but their real goal is to create affordable housing, whether it's an 830G or not. And I have another comment that isn't related to this conversation, so I'll stop there.
Okay, I'll come back to you. Commissioner Braman?
I agree with Commissioner Corcoran and Commissioner Levy. I would not make the creation of an accessory dwelling unit conditioned upon that unit meeting all the requirements of 8-30G, lest we make the perfect the enemy of the good.
Commissioner Levy?
Yeah, and again, I think as a practical matter, most of these units will be occupied by people who would need affordable units. I'm just reluctant to make that an absolute condition. It might be a disincentive. We also have situations where, parents might be there for 5 years and they die, and at that point it would be appropriate to rent it to a teacher, a policeman, or somebody of that nature.
Each of whom are the targets for affordable housing, as we've been told many, many times.
True, but they may or may not qualify in a given case. Again, I think as a practical matter, it's likely that they will be affordable. It would serve those purposes, but to try and link it to 830G, which is Commissioner Corcoran said, is a tool for affordable housing, but not in and of itself a goal. I think we're sort of overcomplicating it, and I would not link the two.
Yeah, all fair points, but the state is telling us to think about affordable housing under the auspices of 830G, and I'd like us all to think about, the other side of the coin. what that statute means to development in other parts of town, and using this as a means to helping us navigate that and expand affordable housing, but doing it in a way that's consistent with how and through accessory dwelling units. I firmly support all of this. Don't get me wrong. Firmly support it. But we're all talking about creating affordable units interspersed all throughout our town, and yet not getting credit for any of it under Section 830G. And in fact, if we are incenting the creation of these dwelling units and not getting credit, we're merely expanding the denominator and making our situation worse.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that any future incentivizing program will include, affordability provisions. I think it's a good topic to discuss and keep in mind. And I think at this point, unless anybody has comments on any other provisions of the draft, I think we're in a position to repackage that for you based on what we heard there being some agreement on, at least on some of these sections, and then get that back to you for future consideration.
Commissioner Corcoran.
The other point I had, I'm wondering about in the AAA zone, the 1,000 square foot. Could these, under these regulations, could that new apartment or dwelling be part of a larger structure that has other purposes, such as a barn or, I don't know, any other accessory building? Or does 1,000 square feet mean that the building has to be 1,000 square feet?
No, as I read that, and I think the intent, and we can clarify it if it's not clear, is that if it's going to be in a detached structure, the cap limit, and I think there was some discussion about potentially considering 1,500 feet, that it would be the apartment within that structure. So if a barn or the structure is larger than 1,500 square feet, and it can be used for other purposes beside the apartment, that the ADU would be capped at the 1,000 or 1,500 feet, whatever you choose. But the building itself could be larger than that if it could also be used as a garage or for a barn or for other purposes.
Okay, thank you.
And I think that also, well, yeah, very good. Other comments, questions? Commissioner Francis?
I think we should remember that a lot of homes in this town are 1,800, 2,500 square feet. And that's why I support keeping the 450, because if you take 40% of something small, you could end up with a very small number. And that's the reason I support keeping the 450 that was there, that was proposed. There's many, many, many houses in this town are in the 2,000.
Yeah, but even at 2,000, at 40% is 800 square feet, right?
And many are small. Houses in my neighborhood were originally small ranches.
1,500 square feet.
They were built at 960. Not many of them are anymore with the push-outs, push-ups, demolitions, McMansions, but 24 by 40, 960. And
so you want to keep the minimum of 450 so
450, I do. So that there will be a decent sized apartment. I mean, as Commissioner Levy said, take a 4,000 foot home or something, yeah, that works. But you've got to remember there are a lot of little capes and little ranches in this town, a lot.
Right, so I'm trying to understand how that would work in relationship to the 40% though, right? So a maximum of 40%, keeping the 450 in there would mean that there needs to be a minimum size of the home. I'm trying to figure out what that number is. So I think it's
more like 1,800 or something. Yeah, you're right.
Do you follow me? So
But,
you're actually,
yeah, I do. But that may be what we have to live with. It's, if you have a little tiny ranch or cape, you can't bring your mother in unless you expand the house, which we are.
1,125 square feet.
1125. So by keeping the minimum of 450 in place, the
You'd
home
only
needs
need
to be
1125.
125 square
Oh,
feet in
okay.
order for them to create that accessory apartment of a minimum of 450.
Yeah,
Is that your
I
intent?
can live with that, yes.
Okay, so the capes that you're talking about at 960 square feet would not be able to build an ADU under these regs because they would not have.
Without expanding, but we're in favor of letting them expand if they wish to.
Twofold. The reg, again, depending on how you, and I know you had advised to drop the originally existing language. The intent, even within an addition, even if you are building an addition, that you can't exceed 40% of the original square footage of the house. It's not 40% of the resulting square footage. It would be 40% of the original square footage, unless there's consensus to remove the originally existing language. That's you
I
had
did.
articulated you
I
had
struck the
articulated
word.
support for that already.
I struck the word originally, yes.
Okay. Again, I think.
And I think everyone supported that. If you wanted to build on an in-law apartment, I heard support for that. But I'm just pointing out why I like the 450, because there are many, many small houses that would have to build on if they want to do this, in fairness to the neighbors.
Okay. Any other members of the commission? Commissioner Braun?
I was looking at some of the material, and again, thank you so much for providing it. I think it was emailed around December 2nd or 3rd. Can not for right now, but can we get an update on that? Because it looks like the Excel list of accessory units, I assume those are all approved legal accessory units. That's around 173. But then there's a color map that looks like it's a page from a larger presentation, which seems to say there's 265. I don't know what that means. And then there's these pink little highlighted areas, all pretty much in every neighborhood, showing, I guess, where the affordable units are scattered throughout town. Although some of them look really huge, like it looks big. I don't know what that means. Can we, for when we have our next meeting on this, can you maybe give us an update or explain the map to us? And also, maybe it would be helpful if Mark was here, somebody also with an eye to what's going on in Hartford, because my understanding is there's a lot of legislation about to be passed, which could severely increase the number of multifamily units, without regard to whether we're 8-30G, all of which will increase our denominator, and yet there's no proposed change to 8-30G, which means we would still be exposed to predatory development. And this is going to add to that. I'm in favor of this, by the way. I just worry that we're just going to get more and more in the hole with predatory 8-30G development as we expand more and more units.
Yep. Short answer is yes, we can resolve all that for you. And I think that, there's obviously more to be discussed and worked out before you're comfortable moving forward. And I think we're in a position now to get to at least to the next step of the discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so Commissioner Francis and Commissioner Levy, do you agree to withdraw your motion? Thumbs up?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. And then can I have a motion to table?
Move to table.
Okay, motion to table by Commissioner Francis, second by Commissioner Levy. Anybody have any questions or comments before we vote on that? Okay, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, motion to table passes unanimously. Thanks everyone for a very good conversation on that. Okay, next on our agenda is a public hearing. We have 3 items on our agenda. They're all related. I'll call them together. For the members of the public that are here and for this item, what we will do is we're going to have the applicant set forth their proposal. if you would like to be heard in public comment, which will follow the applicant's presentation, please just use the chat feature in the lower right-hand corner of your screen and just let Ms. Harrigan know that you would like to talk, and we will call members of the public in the order that they have signed up to do so. Rest assured, though, if you don't sign up and you still want to be heard, I will call for members of the public and be sure that anyone who's on the line who wants to be heard will have an opportunity to speak.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, again, we suspended this hearing last time in the midst of public comment. I know there's been some additional material that's been submitted since that time. I'll leave it to you to see how you want to proceed, but just when we get to public comment, when we get to the public comment period, Mr. Weiss was the speaker at the podium, if you will, when we continued last time. So I know we're not developing quite yet the list. I know in line we'll get to that, but Mr. Weiss was queued up to speak when we continued. But I don't know if you want to go through the material that was submitted subsequent to that continuation, but I'll leave that to your discretion.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Very good. So I will leave that to the applicant, right? And we can, and then we'll move on to the public hearing, to the public comment. So does that make sense? Yes. Yep. Very good. So the first item is zoning regulation amendment application of Primrose Development LLC to amend section 10 of zoning regulations in the design residence district. Number 2, 5545 Park Avenue. Zones change application of Primrose Development LLC to establish a design residence district on land presently zoned R3. And 5545 Park Avenue. Special permit application of Primrose Development LLC pertaining to the construction of an 80-unit residential development. Attorney Rizzio.
Chairman, members of the Commission, Raymond Rizzio, representing Primrose Development LLC with regard to the property at 5545 Park Avenue, along with a change of zone and a text amendment. Chairman, I think we went through a pretty extensive presentation. I know there was some extensive public comment opposition-wise. What I can do is there were 5 things that were discussed that I can take you through quickly. And then rather than me repeat my presentation, I can hold off till after public comment, go through a summary of our presentation, a rebuttal of the opposition, and conclude. I think is probably the quickest way, but at least I can take a couple minutes to take you through the 5 things. It'll take no more than probably 5 minutes to take you through the five issues that I thought we left off with, which was the reason for the continuance.
Very good. Thank you.
Okay. One of the issues that was brought up by the commissioners and asked us to look into would be the possibility, since this is going to be a 80-unit project, that it is across the street from a medical center, that it is down the street from a major university, and we're probably within walking distance to a golf course. Sorry about that. So one of the things that we looked into was there is a sidewalk that runs from the corner of Jefferson Street and Park Avenue that goes across the front of the Sacred Heart Business School, and it ends at their driveway. The other side of that driveway abuts the soccer field where Notre Dame High School and Sacred Heart share a soccer field. That soccer field runs all the way to the driveway of 5545 Park Avenue. We would accept as a condition of approval to add a sidewalk, conforming sidewalk that will take from, and if we can pull up our site plan, basically, or our landscape plan is probably the best that shows the sidewalk on the landscape plan, and that'll lead me into the couple things left. We would commit to a condition of approval that would agree to have a sidewalk connect. So you'll see our property, Chris, if you can go to the landscape plan all the way to the front. On the landscape plan, you'll see there's a sidewalk that runs across the spaces in the front and then runs out to the Park Avenue, and you see it sort of ends at our driveway. We would continue that sidewalk the full length of the soccer field to connect to the current, which will allow a connection to the current sidewalk in front of the Sacred Heart Business School. We have added that was the first thing. The second thing was we have added on our site plan bike racks adjacent to the lower level community space. We have also added electrical car stations, charging car stations at your request. And we've submitted a full landscape and lighting plan, which I can take you through. But the landscape plan, as you can see, and one of the things is this is a very heavily buffered parcel. To the south is the soccer field, and we are going to landscape, as you can see, on the southern end of our property toward the front of our building, and heavily landscape the entrance, putting street trees along Park Avenue. The rear has a drainage basin, and then has some additional plantings, and then there's about a, believe it or not, a 200-foot undisturbed, fully landscaped area before you get to the rear of the property and I'll show you that later on a map. The rear of a property that sits 335 Weeping Willow Road. So this is, and then to the north is even though we're showing some trees, we're showing a fence, you have a couple 100 feet of landscape down to the Merritt Parkway. So this is an extremely well buffered site from any neighboring properties. And then if we go to the lighting plan, let's go to the lighting plan. The lighting plan, we did a photometric lighting plan, which will basically show that, and it was submitted, a photometric plan was submitted to show that there will be no light dispersing off the site. Keep in mind, the rear line, that line to the rear is where our parking lot ends. You still have another at least 50 feet, 50 to 75 feet before you get to the rear of the property. So if you can go back, Chris, bring us back to the actual lighting plan. That's the photometric plan that shows no light will be basically dispersed off property. And then what we have is some lights that light the parking lot. Those will be on 8-foot poles. As you can see, there are, I believe, let me make sure I'm right on that. There are 12 that go around the parking lot from the north corner all the way to the rear to basically to even with the building. Then there are 4 additional light poles that are at the front of the property. You can see them, if we can talk, Chris, if you can move up the 4 poles that are near the entrance. There are 4 poles you see in a loop near the entrance to the property. You'll see one at the entrance of the driveway. It goes 1 to the southern property and then 2 across the front. Those are 4 additional light poles. And then there'll be 21 Ballard lights, which are low-level lights that go around the building. Our whole goal here was to make sure that no light would be dispersed off-site, and that would affect the neighbors. During the last month, and since our hearing, we've had a great chance to meet with the neighbors down at 335 Weeping Willow, which, believe it or not, does not abut our property because there's about 200 feet of undeveloped property that's owned by the diocese in between. We've met with them, in conjunction with them, they came up with this planting plan, and also added at the base of our parking lot to the rear, we'll add a 5-foot solid vinyl fence that will prevent any car lights that come down the driveway to enter the parking garage, prevent any of those lights from shining onto their property. I believe you'll hear from those neighbors later in the meeting, but we've worked a lot with them over the last year, and that gives an idea of the vastness of what happens here. So you'll see the building, you'll see the fence at the top of the base of the parking lot. Then there's a whole drainage basin that will collect all the water that currently just sheet flows off the property. This has all been looked at and approved by engineering. Then you'll see additional planting at the end of the base plan, and then you'll see about where our property ends. And then there's another 200 feet down. that's owned by the diocese before you get to the next neighbor. This is, and that basically takes care of the 5 things that we discussed. There is no impact on any neighboring property. Any possible neighboring property that could be impacted by light, we believe we have shielded or worked out with regard to worked out with regard to additional landscaping. So that is what was added. I'm going to reserve the rest of my comments for rebuttal from the public comment that you will hear going forward. Is that a fair summary, Chairman?
No, that is excellent. Appreciate you bringing us up to date with a summary of the material that's been submitted since we continue the public hearing. And so with that, we'll move to public.
Chairman, I apologize. There is one last thing if you'd like to hear before. Well, everybody's brought up traffic. You did ask Mike Galante, who's on with us, to take a look at the accident reports from both Fairfield and Trumbull. Mike has done that. If you can, probably to avoid him just coming back on rebuttal, this way everybody can say they've heard Mike's presentation. If I could have Mike just unmute, take it quickly through it, and then we can move on to public comment. I can move on to summary, and we can get you out of here.
Thank you, Mr. Galante.
Good evening, Michael. Quickly, you asked for additional updated accident data along Park Avenue near the site frontage and at the Parkway ramps. We collected data from Fairfield, a letter dated to the town November 18th, which was submitted, and a second letter which covered Trumbull accident data because the town line is pretty much down the road, in the middle of the road on Park Avenue. The Trumbull letter is dated December 3rd. Quickly, the accident for the roundabout, which was built in 2016. So we provided data for 2017 through 2019, purposely left out 2020, which is the pandemic year. And there were a total of 5 accidents at the roundabout over a 3-year period. Keep in mind, everyone was learning how to drive through a roundabout, and that number is really not a concern. There was no specific pattern as far as the accident data in the roundabout. Actually, one of them was a head-on collision, so it just shows that people had to learn how to use it. At the site frontage, at our driveway location, which is the Parkway northbound ramps intersection, analyzed 1 accident during that same 3-year period, and that accident was a side swipe. That's a quick summary of the data in the 2 letters that was submitted in response to your question for updated accident data. And I can certainly answer questions now or later.
Okay. Any commissioners have any questions for Mr. Galante? Yeah. Commissioner Corcoran.
I actually have a question for Attorney Rizzio.
Sure.
Yes. Yes.
Well, I had a question on the lighting plan.
Yes.
There's 2 aspects of lighting. There's the amount of light that falls on the ground from a fixture, and I think that's what you were addressing. But the other aspect is the ability to actually see the light bulb. Is that, you mentioned there was some shielding going on?
Yes, there'll be shielding, like cutoffs, like half the, so that the light is directed onto the property. So for example, to the rear of the property, a shield will be placed so that the light is only dispersed going toward the parking lot and not toward the rear where, 300 feet away, there's a residence.
I've forgotten the term, but there is a term for that, the ability to actually look at the bulb. I mean, they may not be dispersing very much light on you, but you can see the bulb.
Correct. We will agree to put the appropriate shielding on there. There's no issue with that. That's what it is designed with, that kind of cutoff.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Any other commissioners have questions of the applicant? Okay. Excellent. So then we'll move to the public hearing, the public comment, public comment. And Emmeline, you said we had Mr. Weiss up first?
Yep, we start with Mr. Weiss, and then Ms. Rooney, followed by Mr. Galucci, and then followed by Mr. Carew and Ms. Uring, who I believe are in the same line.
Got it.
Okay.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So, Mr. Weiss, the mic is yours.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good evening, commissioners. First of all, I don't understand the,
Started, Mr. Weiss. If you're not speaking, members of the public and commissioners, please mute your line. Thank you.
I am speaking.
I understand. I heard some rather intense feedback. I'm just asking others to mute their lines. Thank
Oh,
you.
I'm sorry.
Please proceed.
Well, the first thing is the traffic flow. I don't believe it's accurate because when I leave my house at 5:45 in the morning on Saturday to go to the supermarket, there aren't any cars. If you go before COVID, like 3 o'clock, people are coming down the hill, going up the hill on Jefferson Street. If you leave now, one thing they said, which I don't understand, if that's going to be wait a minute, he said something, I'm sorry to hope we do up for a transit district, you can't go to New York, but unless you go down Park Avenue to Jefferson Street to Easton Turnpike. So you're going to have a big flow of cars going down there. And I don't know about his accident reports. I think we're before the construction of Sacred Heart dorms where the Jewish home used to be. And I think it'd be very dangerous with all the traffic coming out of their driveway. I think there'll be accidents waiting to happen. So that's the first thing I have. The second is the drainage. Because we were affected by water going down the hill and trees have died. And I'd like to have a guarantee from Mr. Rizzio is his name, that if there is a big problem, they will take care of it financially, or the developers, because there's going to be drainage if his basin doesn't work out. And why should we have all our trees fall on our house and God forbid somebody get killed? Because I don't know. I would like to have some sort of guarantee from Mr. Rizzio and the developers. If there is damage because of his drainage, we will be compensated. Also, I think the density for 2.4 acres is too much. And they're asking for spot zoning. Why don't they ask to build a Walmart there? I mean, it doesn't make any sense. The area is too small for what they want. I'm not saying they shouldn't build anything there, but it should be something that is reasonable, not an 80-unit building. I spoke to neighbors. If they built 2 or 3 units, that's fine. We don't care about building. We just don't want something that doesn't belong there. They could, as I said before, it's like putting a round peg into a square hole. It doesn't make sense. And spot zoning, I don't believe, was meant to put a monstrosity in a very small area. And I'd like some protection for the people who get in car accidents and the water runoff. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Weiss, and we appreciate your patience from signing up from the last time and waiting until today. The next you said was Miss Rooney, correct? Miss Rooney?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. All right, well, I spoke at the last hearing and at length, and I'm certainly not going to take anywhere near as long this time. I do think the commission needs to pay a lot of attention to this concept of spot zoning, which has been defined by Connecticut courts as the reclassification of a small area of land in such a manner as to disturb the tenor of the surrounding neighborhood. 2 elements must be satisfied before spot zoning can be said to exist. First, the zone change must concern a small area of land. Second, the change must be out of harmony with the comprehensive plan for zoning. The vice of spot zoning lies in the fact that it singles out for special treatment a lot or small area in a way that does not further such comprehensive plan. In this case, the zone change requested concerns a very small piece of land and is out of harmony with Fairfield's comprehensive plan of zoning, as set forth in its regulations and zoning map, and also as set forth in its plan of conservation and development. Some of the relevant sections of those documents were referred to in my November 10 remarks and November 13 email to you, so I will not repeat them. The applicant wants this commission to change the town's comprehensive plan as set forth in those documents so it can plot its huge housing development down in the middle of an R3 residential district. What it proposes is illegal. I also want to point out that Section 8-2 of the Connecticut General Statute states that zoning regulations must be made in accordance with a comprehensive plan, and that the commission must consider the plan of conservation and development in adopting regulations. Section 8-2 also states that zoning regulations shall be designed to lessen congestion in the streets, to secure safety from flood and other dangers, to prevent the overcrowding of land, to avoid undue concentration of population. If permitted, the applicant's proposal clearly would increase congestion in the streets, cause other traffic dangers, overcrowd land, and create undue concentration of population. The final remark I'll make, because I made many before, is that there has been commentary to the effect that the accidents in and around the roundabout area, which is right where this applicant wants to put his huge development, don't warrant your attention, and that some of the problems are due to the fact that people haven't learned how to deal with the roundabout. The roundabout has been there since 2016. Not necessarily the same people using it all the time. If people haven't learned how to use it by now, it's not likely to happen. I don't go that way very often myself, but when I do, I find it to be a very dangerous situation right now. Never mind with the addition of an 80-unit apartment complex with the potential of 153 bedrooms, because dens can be made into bedrooms. We have no idea really of how many people are going to live there. It's going to be at least 160, probably more like 200 people. Those people are going to be driving. This is a potentially very dangerous situation. It should not be allowed. It will definitely hurt property values in this area. Nobody's against, as Mr. Weiss said, some small development there. It has that potential. Right on the other side of the Merritt Parkway, there are, in fact, single-family homes, and they have steep driveways going down, but they seem to be able to live there, and their homes certainly have some value. Something of that nature can be done on this lot too. I know this lot has been vacant for a long, long time, but obviously the owners are trying to hold out to make a killing on it, and it's unreasonable of them to do so and not fair to our neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Rooney. Ms. Harrigan, who next?
We have Mr. Galucci next.
Thank you. Mr. Galucci, the mic is yours.
Ms. Rooney, if you could mute.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
Hello there, I'm here.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Please go ahead.
Okay, so I'm Mark Anthony Galucci, and I live at 279 Weeping Willow Lane. And I've lived here on and off since 1962. I grew up here. And the property that's the subject of this discussion, if I go right out into my deck over here in the wintertime when there's no leaves on the tree and look that way, I can see that property and I can see even a piece of the house over there. And so I'm very concerned about a large black apartment building being plopped right in the middle of the woods. I second, third what the other people have said about the traffic. I've been driving since I was 16. I've been trying to leave Weeping Willow and go out to Jefferson Street for many, many years. And I tell you, it gets worse and worse and worse. Sometimes when I want to go to Park Avenue, the cars racing down the hill are so fast, so furious, that I actually have to make a right turn, get on the Merritt Parkway, and get off of Park Avenue to get to Park Avenue. And I don't know if it's a matter of public record, but because we are right between the two exits that are close together, whenever there are any problems on the parkway or backup and stuff, people use Jefferson Street as their conduit to get off the parkway and go down there. And when that happens, it's almost impossible to get off the street. If these apartments would be used for students, and that's what I presume the target market is, these students, for the most part, are probably going to be students going to Sacred Heart and going to the attractions in Fairfield, which means that they're basically going to leave the property, make a right, go down Park Avenue to the intersection, make a right, go down Jefferson Street. So I think most of the traffic generated by this property will come down that hill on Jefferson Street. I know that we don't often concern ourselves when we talk about planning and zoning matters about the welfare of animals, but that strip of woods between the houses and the parkway is a major, major thoroughfare. It's the Merritt Parkway for wildlife, trying to travel from Lake Mohegan Cascades up to other areas in Easton and Trumbull, and even from the golf course and up this way and back down again. And I think that it's a shame that would be lost for them. I don't understand the logic of this intent development. The motivation seems to be, let's see how many apartments we can possibly cram onto this property. That has to be the motivation, because it can't be profit. It can't be that the project isn't feasible if it were much smaller in scope. It's way too intense, as people have pointed out, much, much too intense for that tiny piece of property. And for those reasons and other reasons, I would urge you to turn it down. I don't think it's consistent with the master plan over the years, which has been that this area is one, single family residence, which of course, because we've been here for so long, and two, institutional type development that caters to the region. And these apartments don't fit the bill for either one of those things. And I just urge you to turn it down. I'm very disappointed that the developer has proposed this particular kind of use for that property. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Galucci. Appreciate your comments. Ms. Harrigan, who's next?
We have Scott Carew, C-A-R-E-W.
Mr. Carew?
Yeah, hi. I'm here with Carrie Uring. We live at 335 Weeping Willow, which is the home directly that will be the closest. The back of our property will abut the open space before the drain in the apartment building happens. So we've been here a few months. So since we moved in, Ray and Primrose have worked with us to alleviate concerns by adding landscaping, additional trees, the privacy fence, the lighting, and reducing the size of the building down to 80 under the application. And I'm hopeful that the drainage will actually help an area where we have some down trees. So overall, we support the application and will not oppose it. And we'd prefer this current development to a larger multifamily residential or low-income building that could be constructed at the site under the Section 830G of the Connecticut General Statutes. So we feel like it's with what they've offered and done in terms of the landscaping, it's a better option than a bigger unit with low-income housing that would probably go through if this doesn't. So that's all we have. Thank you.
Ms. Harrigan?
Oh, that was for both of us. I'm sorry.
Yes, I'm sitting right here. I agree. Yes.
Very good. Very good. So noted. Thank you very much, both of you.
And next we have James Dunn.
Hi, James Dunn, Toll House Lane, which is just north of the proposed development. So first I want to bring up the data in relation to traffic accidents. Was data sought from Connecticut State Police or Bridgeport Police, given that there is bordering jurisdictions? Also, Connecticut State Police do investigate the on and off ramp accidents. I wanted to see if we can get some data on that as well. I did hear the Trumbull and the Fairfield data. Second is, I just want to make a point to bring up in comparison, Easton and Bridgeport planning and zonings recently, or in the past 5 years, have challenged and rejected applications from developers to develop 4100 Park Avenue with Bridgeport, which is Monticello Gardens. The intent there was for Sacred Heart students. Also, I believe about 10 years back, the town of Easton purchased the property at 22 South Park Avenue, which is now known as the Easton Prayer Center. There was a reason for that, and I think we should discuss further what the reasons for those towns' planning and zonings to reject those applications were. My last concern is, of course, the impact on the schools. If these are meant for residentials with children, it could be potentially 300 or I'm sorry, about 200 to 250 additional students to the North Stratfield School District, which would overwhelm that school. Also, town utilities, what impact does that have? Sewage, water. Do we have enough facilities up there to accommodate a structure of this size? Also, of course, with the development of the Sacred Heart properties in and around Sacred Heart in the past 10 years, it has definitely increased the traffic condition up here. And that roundabout was not made to handle that type of volume. As it is now, especially during snowstorms, that hill, the Park Avenue Hill from Toll House Lane to the roundabout, is a very, very dangerous roadway when it's slippery. Cars cannot get up there. So those are my points. I am new to this meeting. I was just made aware of this tonight by a neighbor, so forgive me for being all over the place, but those are the points I want to make. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dunn. We'll look for the applicant to respond to those in their rebuttal.
I don't have anyone else listed.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. So that is the end of the list of those folks that signed up to speak. I noticed that there are a fair number of other members of the public that are on and in the meeting, and so I'll call now for anyone to speak if they would like to. Okay. Going once, going twice, and sold. So nobody signed up in the chat and nobody's come forward. So that concludes our public comment.
Chairman, members of the commission, once again, Raymond Rizzio. Really, I'm happy to be before you tonight and hopefully can shed some light how we got here. I know it's about a month since I made my presentation, but I'll be brief and kind of explain to you how we got here. I don't think the public that's complaining has a full understanding of the repercussions and the went in here with the town, with adjoining neighbors, with the neighbors across the street, with the neighbors to the south of us, that allowed us to bring a proposal before you. I'm probably the best adept to discuss this property because I think I've been handling zoning matters with regard to the property for probably over 10 years. And the public has opposed everything that has gone there, certainly the members of Weeping Willow. And it's unfortunate. It ended up passing on a surgical center that ended up going across. The current owners have had this property in their family for over 50 years. They've wanted to sell it. They believe it is a developable property. It is certainly not. They don't believe it's would be appropriately used as a two or three house subdivision, especially given the fact that a light sits directly at its entrance when there was the whole redevelopment of the roundabout, which they were very happy to know. So the owners ended up going to contract with our client, Mr. Geddes, with the understanding that he was going to see this thing through. Mr. Geddes came to see me. Originally, years ago, they thought they would do an affordable housing project there. And they proposed and have seen, and it is developed under the same footprint within the same limits of disturbance that you could fit 129 units there. The problem at the time a few years ago was that there was no access to sewers. In the interim, when Mr. Geddes decided to give this another try, we have worked with the diocese. There is actually a connection for the sewers, an additional tap on Weeping Willow Drive. Mr. Geddes has obtained an easement across the property. He has the ability to have the sewers connect on Weeping Willow Drive. That in effect unlocked the property, because the theory was that there was no ability to get sewers there, so the property could only be used for we believe underutilized couple of single family residences with septics. So we had obtained approval from the WPCA for 99 units. We reduced the 129 to 99 to try and come in with a conforming or a modified proposal that we thought the town would find better than an 8-30G application. So Mr. Geddes took this project through code compliance, got WPCA approval, got wetlands approval for 99 units. As we talked with the neighboring owners, talked the project out, we reduced the project to 80 units. This is in conjunction with a previous text amendment that the commission, I don't think was as warmly embraced as due to it was transit oriented, and I don't think we agreed on how appropriate transit orientation was here. So we've decided to come back and do a modification to a design residence district in an R3 zone, which is before you. And if you just indulge me, I think the commission really got a feel for the work that has gone in over a year to get us to where we have here. When we got through going through the wetlands process, the former wetlands administrator asked us to please, could we see about going to Bridgeport, and instead of going through and disturbing the land behind the Carew and Euring's house and going across the very much heavily treed area to bring our sewer in, would we look into tying into the city of Bridgeport? We then went to the city of Bridgeport. The city of Bridgeport has approved this project to tie into its sewers. The other issue was the WPCA, even though they approved this, also asked us to go there because what they realized is that when they designed the rework of the pump station at the bottom of Jefferson Street, that it probably couldn't. They weren't sure that it could handle the flow. So, and it was they thought it was going to take, and it was going to take millions of dollars to build a pump station that would handle the flow that they'd already approved. So they also asked us to go to Bridgeport. We went to Bridgeport. We have approval for this project to tie into the Bridgeport system. So the beauty of this project is it's going to be in Fairfield. Fairfield will get all of the tax benefits. Yet all of the utilities will be going, I mean, all of the sewage will be going right in directly into the Bridgeport system. That has all been approved, it has all been submitted, and I think it was noted throughout our application and through the code compliance process. So the final thing, when what came out of an earlier application, was that there was a concern about affordable housing and that coming in for 10%. We thought, we are going to ask for this increase in density, that we would also, as part of our text amendment, agree to an increase in the affordable housing, which I think is something that hopefully in the new master plan will be addressing. And we've agreed in our text amendment to increase the affordable housing from 10% to 15%. Therefore, in this 80-unit project, you would have 12 affordable units and 68 market rate units. We reduced the size of the project. We went from 99 units down to 80 units, of which there are 51 bedrooms, 32 bedrooms. We also have 158 parking spaces. So even if, as Ms. Rooney stated, that there are dens, there are 41 units that have dens, which means we have 110 bedrooms plus 41 dens is 151 possible sleeping quarters or possible areas that may be able to be used as that people would worry about be converted to a bedroom. So you have 110 bedrooms, 41 den, that's 151. We still have 158 parking spaces. Our proposal, which we exceed, is that in the text amendment was that the parking ratio be 1.5 parking spaces per unit plus 10% for parking. We exceed what is required. We also then take into account every bedroom and every possible room that could be used as a bedroom will have its own parking spaces, which I think is unprecedented in most of the applications that have come before you. The funny thing is when you have these 1.5 units per unit, they typically don't, it's whether it's a 1-bedroom, a 3-bedroom, a 4-bedroom unit, it's still 1.5 spaces per unit. What we thought was important and why we have such additional parking, because there's clearly no on-street parking. We are not going after the students. This is going to be a workforce. We believe it's people that are going to commute to New York City, to commute to Stanford, commute to even Shelton, also commute to, also work at the university or work at what is the largest private hospital facility across the street for Yale in Fairfield County. So there's a huge workforce available to be housed in this project, along with people who commute to either Shelton or Stanford. We believe that it's more than adequately parked. We believe the fact that it's 51 bedrooms and only 32 bedrooms, that there will be no impact on the schools. I think the current tax bill is probably about $15,000 a year. I would envision the future tax bill be somewhere around $400,000 a year with no impact on services. So the person who lived on Toll House Road discussed the fact that, he wanted to know what kind of services this would impact. This will be a net gain to the town monetarily. It will be a reduction of any possible use of any services and that no sewage will go to the town. And we believe that there will be, as you've known as you've evaluated many of these apartment projects, the possibility of school-age kids is minimal. And then it's even further reduced when 70% of your units are 1-bedrooms. For all those reasons, we believe this project should be approved. This property will be developed. There is plans for us, if we had to come back, we'll have to come back with a larger project over the same footprint, over the same limits of disturbance. We have greatly reduced this project by 1/3 over what could be permitted. We have come up with a proposal that has increased the amount of affordable over any other non-830G application in town. And we have more parking, probably per unit or per bedroom than any other project that has previously been approved. With regard to spot zoning, I think Ms. Rooney only sees part of the picture. She talked about this parcel being in the middle of an R3 zone. I would say this parcel exists as far on the outskirts of the R3 zone in any neighborhood, any impact on any neighborhood. But for the only people who I believed and we've worked with is Ms. Uring and Mr. Carew, who we've spent a considerable amount of time with to make sure that they were comfortable with this project. Keep in mind, you need, when you talk about this project being in an R3 zone, if you go down Park Avenue, it is, I believe, over a mile before you get to Valley Road that you see a house in Fairfield. You have the whole Sacred Heart campus, and then you have the Fairchild Wheeler Golf Course. How do you get to Jefferson Street? You need to go almost a mile, or probably I think 3/4 of a mile to, I believe it's Donna Court or Donna Circle, before you can get to a house on the south side of Notre Dame High School. And unfortunately, you know, I feel sorry for Mr. Carew and Ms. Uring, because they had no idea this application process had been going on. I found out that they closed about 10 days or a week before our last application, and immediately went out to meet with them and because I felt sorry for them that they had no idea that this project was going in, not abutting them, over 200 feet from their property line, and that they don't abut it. So we quickly did what we could to meet with them, and we did what we could to address their concerns as new neighbors. In Weeping Willow Road, where you hear these neighbors talk about the traffic, is over a mile away from this project, the entrance to Weeping Willow Road. What I think is also important here is this is probably the safest part of town to put this proposal. As you heard from Mr. Galante, there had been minimal accidents over the last 3 years. Mostly he attributes to a learning curve with regard to this new roundabout, which I know because I was involved with the project that paid to put this in, which was a couple $1 million to put this roundabout in, which made this whole Park Avenue area safety. It used to be called, it wasn't a roundabout. It was kind of like a half circle that people just spread through and barely touched the brakes. There were more accidents in that area than I could ever remember. And you took your life in your hands, knowing whether you could, how to actually operate in that area, because there was no way to slow down. Now you're going to have this project that's controlled by a light, that's controlled by a state-of-the-art roundabout. It is probably the safest area of town to have a multifamily housing development. It has received wetlands approval. It has received WPCA approval. It has received approval. We hope to receive approval from you folks so that this can go forward. If not, this project will come back. It'll just come back larger. We believe that this is a quality project. It's the right area. In talking about Ms. Rooney's discussion about spot zoning, we don't believe this is spot zoning at all. First of all, we're not changing the zone to a different zone other than R3. It remains a design residence district. It is the absolute appropriate spot for this property. This, if anything, is miszoned as R3 because I don't know of another R3 parcel that sits next to all institutional uses on a Merritt Parkway, controlled by a light on an entrance, next to an entrance and exit ramp to one of the state's major thoroughfares. So I don't believe this is spot zoning. I believe she cites, and I went through her discussion where she talked about in the middle of an R3 district. This is clearly not in the middle of the R3 district. This is on the outside of this R3 district in an area that can never be considered a neighborhood, a residential neighborhood. This is an institutional neighborhood up and down. Your residential neighborhood doesn't start until you get to the north side of the Merritt Parkway, which is a totally different neighborhood on the other side of the roundabout, on the other side of the highway, and has houses on both sides of the street with no institutional uses on either side or abutting any of those neighbors. Directly across the street from this property is a 225,000 square foot medical facility. To the south of it is a soccer field used by a university and a high school, and Sacred Heart University's business school, and then a major university. This clearly is not a project that sits in the middle of an R3 neighborhood. Secondly, she talked about a special treatment for a small lot or small area. This is probably one of the largest, this is probably the largest undeveloped lot in that whole area at 2.4 acres. It's a very large lot. It's a very large lot that makes it susceptible to certain types of development, but also makes it attractive for other parts of development that will support the institutional uses that surround it. I clearly believe that you satisfy the the spot zoning argument, in that we are leaving it as R3 with a design residence district overlay, with a density that is consistent with other text amendments that the town has done in town, in that we are limiting the density to 50 bedrooms per acre, that it has to be on a major road, that it has to be near a highway, and that it's limited so that it's surrounded by institutional uses. All of those reasons support the fact that this is not spot zoning and more the appropriate zoning for probably one of the most unique parcels left to be developed in the entire town. For all those reasons, I think you should support this application. The text amendment, I believe, is appropriate, as we talked about, and I think you know. It requires the property to be at least 2 acres. It must be within 150 feet of an entrance and exit ramp to the Merritt Parkway. The density must be no more than 50 bedrooms per acre. Exceed no more than 90 units. Even though this is only proposing 80 units, you could certainly, if you wanted to reduce this text amendment to 80 units, we would certainly support that. And no dwelling unit containing more than 2 bedrooms. We also talk about 15% of the units being affordable, which is an increase and helps you get closer to your state required mandate, which I think is very important. We've also split the buildings. We've been, as we know, this commission has been concerned in other areas to not see one large, long-looking building, so that this building is actually split into 2 tiers with a common area in the middle, as has been done in other projects. It shall not exceed a height of 50 feet. Part of the reason of that is driven by topography, which would be unique, but allow for parking underneath the building also. And the final change with that, the structure shall not exceed 50% of the structure, 50% of the entire parcel, the floor area not exceed 100% of lot area. We discussed and also added in, as I said, parking of 1.5 parking spaces per unit, along with 10% parking, 10% of the parking for visitor parking. We would satisfy all those regulations. We believe the regulation is consistent with the comprehensive plan. The regulation is not spot zoning because it is very consistent with applying to one of the most unique pieces in the entire town. And we believe it gives this proposal has given the town the ability to control the development, increase its affordable units, increase its tax base, and really does everything it can to satisfy the goals of your comprehensive plan and your zoning regulations. This is a developer that has not come and hit you over the head with the biggest proposal he can. This is a guy who's come in. He said, how can I work with the town? He's reduced the size. He's reduced the numbers. He's increased the affordable. He's made sure that the parking is consistent. He's actually gone to another municipality and gotten the sewer services at the behest of the town of Fairfield and the wetlands department, so that there be no impact on any non-developed area that exists beyond the property. I don't know that you've had a developer that's worked more with the town in the town departments in getting to where we are today. For all those reasons, I respectfully request this commission grant the change of the text amendment that has been proposed, grant the change to design residence district in an R3 as an overlay on the current R3 at 5545 Park Avenue, and approve this as a special permit, this 80-unit apartment project. And that's it. I'd be happy to answer any questions. I don't know if all of you, I know all of you have not ridden, I know the Bobowicks are on this call, have owned the property. It's been a long journey to get where we thought we've put a project before you that works, that is a project of compromise, that is a project that doesn't have to go through the courts, that is a project that satisfies the town's financial concerns, service concerns, development concerns, and provides housing to a workforce that is, probably the densest workforce in town when you consider the amount of the medical community that sits across the street and the university community that sits just south of the property. We think this would be an excellent place to live for commuters and an excellent place for people who work in this immediate area. And we believe that this is the best possible project for this site. Be happy to answer any questions the commission has.
Great. Thank you, Attorney Rizzio. I believe Mr. Dunn had asked Mr. Galante whether there was any records or data about the state police investigating accidents or accident data from the state police on the matter of the roundabout.
Michael, again, the accident data is from the local police forces, which Fairfield prefers we do. That accident data would be submitted to the state. Quite frankly, would be the same data that comes back from the state. In this case, where we have Trumbull jurisdiction across the road from the site itself, we have that data from them. So it's the local information from two towns. It'd be the same data, quite frankly. It should be the same data from the state if we would have asked them for the data for these intersections. No, all local data.
Okay. So no, we didn't. There was no request of the state for accident or investigations regarding accidents in the air. Okay.
Chairman, can I just ask one last thing, and I could either put it up on mine, and then just to give the commission to emphasize my thing. Chris, if you could bring up just the real quick, and then I'll leave with this view. Can you bring up the not the overlay, but the drone shot or the overhead picture of the site? Give the commission a real feel how unique this site is from an overhead perspective and its lack of impact on any neighboring properties, and then show the distances. I think we have one that has the distances from any neighboring properties. So 5545, you see the red box there is the back of the building. It is 310 feet. This was laid out by Jason Spath to show how far the building will be from the closest property line. The only property that could possibly be affected by sight, by view, by anything is the property at 335 Weeping Willow. As you can see, its backyard runs north to south to the Merritt Parkway. As you can see, there'll be not any disturbance. You see the red line for the 5545 Park Avenue property. There will not be any disturbance of all that wildlife that runs up and down the Merritt. I've been back there. It's a jungle. I got to tell you, we couldn't even walk to the site from the Ewing and Carew house. We had to walk up onto the soccer field to come out and look and see where it's going to go, as there's about a 30-foot drop. Mr. Patul, I think, previously mentioned that there'll be an improvement to the overall drainage to the site. Laura Pulley has reviewed and her department have reviewed all of Mr. Patula's calculations to show that the drainage is adequate for the site and actually improves the drainage for the site. Everything, you have to understand, everything doesn't flow directly west toward the Carew Ewing property. It flows north and down the hill toward the Merritt Parkway. Those properties sit significantly higher than the road. So as you can see, if you look across the street to see that large medical center, which is just fantastic, has a tremendous amount of nurses that would like to live here. There's a church right next door to it. It's institutional. And then I can't pull the rest of the overhead in, but I just wanted to show you how unique this property is, its lack of impact. You have to go all the way to the, if you look even on the other side of the Merritt Parkway, which is another 500 feet away before you get to a house. This is the appropriate spot for this development. We think this will be something that you should support wholeheartedly and something the town should welcome and treat as an asset, as treat as converting in effect, a liability and a non-income producing property to an asset that provides affordable housing and workforce housing to your community. I thank you for all your time, and I appreciate your patience.
Do any other members of the commission have any questions for the applicant? Commissioner Braun.
Do we have a copy of that aerial? I didn't see it in the package. I tried to take a cell phone photo just now. It didn't come out too good.
I think it's been submitted, hasn't it?
Oh, really? I'll look through it. Okay.
If not, Chris, if you can email it to Emmeline, make sure that it's, I would typically step through and hand it to you, but I can't do that tonight.
Right. If you could, you've shown it. If you could email it into the commission, that would be helpful.
Yes.
Okay.
Drive. I welcome you to drive that location and tell me if you feel like that's at the middle of an R3 residential neighborhood. I'm sure you've all been by the property and never knew it even existed.
Yeah, you've now made that point several times. You have.
Thank you. Thank you for not muting me.
Yeah. You know, that is the power of new technology, is that
Yes, it is.
yeah.
I'm well aware of it.
You should be grateful that my finger's not on the button. It's Ms. Harrigan.
Oh, I think it's on the button. I just think you haven't pressed it yet.
Anyway, any other members of the commission have any questions? All right, very good. Then with that, I will close the public hearing on this item, and no other business. I will adjourn the meeting. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.